Vestine here, aka the Mindset Mom, and I'm here to give you some tips on what you can do if you suspect that the person that you're dating is on the autism spectrum, or they have actually disclosed that they have been diagnosed or suspect they are on the autism spectrum. And this video will show you exactly what you can hone in on, the types of questions you can ask, and what you can be doing to prepare yourself and checking in with yourself throughout this whole process, okay? So I hear from so many people who say, you know what, there were red flags all along in the beginning, but I just didn't pay any attention to them, or why didn't I see this coming? The person that I ended up being in a committed relationship is nothing like they were when we were dating and when he was pursuing me. Now, there are some sex differences in the autism spectrum disorder kind of world regarding how people date and the types of things that you may encounter. So my experience comes from a man who is on the spectrum and a neurotypical woman, okay? So I will be addressing mainly in this video. However, you can take away things when those tables are turned. There are things that you can take away, principles that you can apply, whether the person that you are dating is a woman or a man, okay? So one of the first things is that I always ask you, instead of just being swept up in their charm and their smarts, their intelligence and things like this, the first thing you want to do is you want to become a conscious observer, okay? I've talked about this in other videos when we are dealing with our own kind of like shadow emotions and things that we work through, but I want you to do it in a manner that you're almost like putting on a scientist hat. And I know that this is kind of seems a little bit anti-intuitive when you are pursuing a romantic dating relationship. However, it is imperative, and I'm going to challenge you to use your prefrontal cortex on a regular basis. That's the front area where you use judgment and where you evaluate things, okay, make decisions. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have a variety of situations that you and your potentially ASPIE partner or your person you're dating can put yourself in a variety of contexts, okay? Don't just go out to dinner all the time. And this is actually really smart to do also for neurotypical relationships, but you're gonna approach it in a little bit of a different way with someone on the spectrum. You want to see them in a variety of situations, especially social situations. You wanna hone in and you want to really observe how they interact with people. You wanna observe their facial expressions. Do they seem natural? Are they stressed in that moment? Do you pick up signals of them being overwhelmed in any social situation? How do they interact with other people, especially people that are important to you, like family and friends? Do they just talk about their own special interests? Because this can be a typical behavior for people on the spectrum. They get so into and focused on their own special interests, or sometimes we call them obsessions, but really, to be honest, that part of the brain, the limbic system in Asperger's syndrome people, is larger, and so they actually have the ability to learn like to a PhD level, like that far surpasses our ability to do it, and in a shorter amount of time. They really know how to hone in and learn to a very, very high and deep level, the things that are interesting to them. So, but we want to see how they deal with that in a social situation. So when you are with your date or your partner, do they allow for reciprocity in the conversation? In other words, and I'm not just talking about letting you talk, like they talk about their special interests and then it's your turn to talk about your special interests. I want to know, do they open and take initiative to ask you about your interests? Now, this can be a little bit tricky because they can do this and it has been a form of scripting and masking that they have learned all along. It's not coming from a genuine place of them being curious and interested and really want to get like inside your brain or inside how your world operates, okay? This can be a kind of learned response to this is how you operate in dating situations. That doesn't mean it should disqualify them from being your date or your partner. But in order for you to understand, you got to be very observant, and especially about the manner of which they communicate in social situations or in a reciprocal conversation with you on a date. Does it feel natural? Does it feel normal? If it doesn't, and oftentimes it won't, I want you to ask yourself this question: how do I feel about this? Now, this is going to require you to really to be in connection with your feelings, which a lot of us are not when we are out on a date. Let's just be honest. A lot of times, you know, we are up in our heads, we're thinking too much, we're like anticipating what our answer is going to be. You cannot have any of that when you are dating a potential ASPIE, okay? Or someone you think is on the spectrum. You need to be fully present with your body, with your emotions. You need to be checking in constantly with your emotions and your feelings, because you are responding to something that's going on with this person, and you have to be fully and completely honest, and you have to know yourself. In other words, it's going to take a modicum of emotional intelligence and like a knowing of yourself, right? That old famous quote, know thyself. Well, before entering any dating situation, I would recommend this anyway, but especially with someone who is potentially on the spectrum. Okay, so you want to check in with yourself moment by moment. You want to let what they're saying sit with you and really listen to them. But you also want to check in with how that makes you feel. Like things that you notice, don't let it slide by. You can actually even take something that they've said, or a funny expression or something that's going on, and say, okay, how do I feel about this? Have I encountered this at any other time in my life? And just kind of go through your experiences and find out how that may have made you feel in a similar situation in your experience. So that's another thing. You want to find out how open they are and how skilled they are with reciprocity, but you also want to see what their limitations with it are. The reason I'm telling you that you need to be aware of the limitations regarding this is that you're going to have to evaluate on a very personal level if this is acceptable to you or not. Now remember, the dating kind of paradigm is really, if you want to look at it that way, people are on their best behavior, right? This is like going to be the best that it's probably going to be. Maybe not if you're planning on growing a relationship, right, and going deeper into a deeper relationship. But as far as like the other person's behavior toward you and the thoughtfulness and things like this, it's probably going to be at its height during the courtship phase. That's just the way of the world, right? So you want to really be aware that things that pop up, or things that you may notice that your partner is starting to have trouble with, you want to be on the lookout for that, because you're going to need to evaluate your needs in light of this new information. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're on a date, and after the date it goes well, you guys decide to talk later, maybe that evening, because the rest of the weekend you're both going to be busy. Okay, so your ASPIE goes home, you go home, you're anticipating a phone call, it never comes. Don't assume that it's because your person is not interested in you, okay? You need to understand that, especially when we've been together, there is this need, even in neurotypical relationships, but it is so pronounced in a neurodivergent relationship, that the person on the spectrum needs time away. They need that space, and they need to recoup, kind of like go into their preferred state of isolation. And I've talked about that before in previous videos. They need to be by themselves, and even though they may have agreed to something in person that you were going to talk on the phone, they get home and they find out that they just don't have any more spoons for that. They just don't have the energy. They just want to go and like go into their own little world, maybe focus on their interests, and just like be by themselves. If they have a pet, sometimes they'll just, you know, close in with a pet for a while, or eat their meals and whatever, watch TV. So you need to check in and evaluate if this type of behavior is acceptable to you for a long-term relationship. And the reason why is because with people on the spectrum, you can expect more of this. This is actually a part of shutting down. Sometimes it's shut down emotionally. Sometimes it's just them recuperating in their preferred state of isolation. But you have to check in with yourself and ask yourself, okay, if this were to continue or increase, would I be okay with this? And you have to be completely honest. Here's the thing, guys and gals, this is where you get to really start focusing on your vision for what you want for your relationship. Do you want a relationship that makes you feel loved, that makes you feel accepted, that makes you feel like admired and doted upon? Of course, we all do, right? But there is a trade-off in a neurodivergent relationship. You get a lot of things that maybe you haven't had in the past with your neurotypical relationships, but there's also a trade-off. There's a trade-off in some of this behavior that's like shutdowns or emotional meltdowns, whereby your Asperger's syndrome partner might be completely blunt with you, or and it comes off oftentimes as criticism. Okay, so if you are really sensitive to criticism, this might not be the relationship for you. I'm just going to be totally authentically honest with you. If you are very sensitive to criticism, or even someone just evaluating your behavior or something that you've done or the way you do things, if that's not for you, you need to really be honest with yourself and say, no, I really prefer somebody who is going to take my feelings into consideration before they address an issue they have with me, and think about how their words land with me. If that's you, you need to exit stage left right now, okay? Because I have talked to hundreds of people who are in neurodivergent relationships, and this does increase over time. And especially, do some behaviors get better throughout the relationship? Yes, they can, especially with really good communication and clear, blunt expectations. However, there is also a time toward the end of life where a lot of the cognitive function goes on the decline, okay? And so you remember, you are evaluating when you are in a courtship relationship whether this relationship can go the distance, whether it can fulfill your needs long term. Are there some really strong people who are very conscious and very super aware that they can be happy even in a relationship that might not meet all of their emotional needs? They might get their emotional needs met somewhere else and have like systems of support around them. Absolutely. And if you are one of those people, I want you to take that into consideration, that you're going to need to be one of those people in a long-term relationship that's on the spectrum. Okay? Is this making sense? So I highly recommend when you do your journaling that you write down exactly what you want in a relationship. So do that before you even start dating anybody on the spectrum or could be on the spectrum that you suspect is on the spectrum. Next, I want you to journal after every single date. So you come home, you write the date, write where you went and what you did, okay, at the top, and then go into your feelings. Remember, how did the interactions go? Was there any moments that were tense? How did that make you feel? What do you attribute that tenseness to? Knowing the meltdown and the shutdown cycles are a very real thing. And also that mind blindness and theory of mind, whereby the person with that's on the spectrum has a difficult time anticipating what you're thinking and what you're feeling and anticipating those needs. What do you attribute these moments of tension or these disappointments that you might encounter? What do you attribute them to? Does this make sense? I think if you go back and you're evaluating in the relationship, when you start getting to that point where maybe the person is continuing to pursue and they're really serious, because this can happen. That was my experience. My experience was this person was pursuing me on a consistent, very forward, moving the relationship forward basis. And I really wish that I had done this as a process just to know myself better and to understand relationships a lot better. But you can do it now. Go back through your journals if you start feeling like the relationship's getting too serious or more serious, and maybe even quickly. Go back through your journal entries and start looking and finding patterns. Okay, this is where you get to be like the scientist, right? Which is really exciting for me because I love science, I love behavior science, but you can be the observer. You can be the observer in the relationships, because let me tell you something. in a neurodivergent relationship, get used to that role because you will have to be the observer, okay? There are certain things that your partner will be able to do to contribute to the relationship, and there are certain things that you will be required to participate and to contribute to the relationship. And definitely relationship dynamics, emotional intelligence, and getting the temperature for how the relationship is going, whether it's healthy or not, that, friend, lies on your shoulders. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful. Leave me down in the comments what part really spoke to you. Are you gonna do the journaling after dates? Are you going to see if this person maybe on a date is even open to diagnosis pathway? That's really important too, because you can have those more serious discussions as you are evaluating, seeing that this is the relationship for you. And I'll make another video about that conversation that you can have with them to see the things to do and not do with your ASPIE partner to see if they're going to be open to diagnosis or not. And I will put that in a video for you. And like this video if you got some value from it. If my content resonates with you, please share with somebody you think might need this information, and definitely subscribe to my channel, okay? That tells me that I'm going in the right direction. I can bring you better content and you'll see it right away. That's it for me today. Keep healing, even in a neurodivergent relationship, and I'm signing off saying live brilliantly. Bye now.